something else at stake. Democracy itself. The overwhelming majority of Americans believe our democracy is at risk, that our democracy is under threat. They too see that democracy is on the ballot this year.
President Biden's dire warning to voters just before the midterms, and now that the expected red wave did not pan out, the president and other top Democrats telling Americans they can breathe easy now. Our democracy is still intact.
For democracy, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
Our democracy is intact. And when democracy is intact, this is what it looks like.
One of his big closing speeches was about democracy. And people said, oh, that's not smart politically. And the president, I think his compass on this has been absolutely right all along.
Oh, boy. But Fox voter analysis found Americans were not worried about losing our democracy, not even a little. Top of mind was inflation, followed by other issues, none of them being an end of our republic. Power panel, Cassie Smedile, director of America Rising PAC, and Kevin Walling, former Biden campaign surrogate. Kevin, basically they came out after the fact, the Democratic leadership, and said, our democracy is in good shape because we had a good day.
Yeah, Dagen, listen, I think there were some serious concerns, not just with Democrats, but with Republicans and independents, that this was the first nationwide election following January 6th. And I'm happy to see a return to some normalcy where losing candidates concede graciously, both Republicans and Democrats, to the victors. You saw that in Ohio with J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. You even saw that in New Hampshire with Don Bolduc and Maggie Hassan. That's what we are. I battle it out with Cassie all the time, but I adore her. And Republicans, Democrats, this is a good thing for democracy to see that kind of return to some normalcy following a really contested 2020 election. I think that's a good thing.
Cassie, your reaction to Kevin, I could go on for hours about this subject, but what say you, Cassie?
Well, I adore Kevin as well, but I would say democracy is on the ballot in the sense that this was the first national election after the COVID lockdowns. And what you saw across the board is people voting about the issues closer to home. Every Republican governor who was on the ballot for re-election won, and many of them overwhelmingly. We talk a lot about Ron DeSantis, but look at Mike DeWine in Ohio. They won by more than 1 million votes apiece because they did right by their constituents. When the heavy hand of the federal government was trying to close everybody down, was trying to keep kids out of school, was trying to play too much into what our kids are learning in school, you saw voters overwhelmingly say, we want to stick to the people who are guiding our families to empower our own decisions. So everybody wants to talk about Congress. I still ultimately think that there were a lot of good things that happened for Republicans there as well. But I think more than anything, you saw voters really pay close attention to the issues that impact them every day at home. And that was a really good night for Republicans. And that gives Republicans something to springboard off of as we now look, of course, to 2024.
Kim Strassel writes about that in the Wall Street Journal today, in fact, and just a few lines from her op-ed talking about the Republicans who did well, a lot of the re-elected or newly elected governors, they did the people's business. And she writes, spend your fight on policies that make voters' lives matter. Give them optimism and back it up with results, and you'll be rewarded at the polls. This week's red waves is what she was writing about. But so much for Jim Crow 2.0 or Jim Eagle. Didn't happen. Moving on to critics once again calling out President Biden. He used a cheat sheet to call on reporters at his press conference Wednesday. He said he'd been given, quote, given a list of 10 names to call on, and there were more than 100 reporters in the room. So who decides who gets on that list and why? The White House Deputy Press Secretary telling the Daily Caller, not sharing. I don't have anything to share with you on that. Cassie, what do you say about this? Does this matter? Certainly the press corps in D.C. is upset.
Well, yes, the press corps in D.C. is upset, but I mean, I feel like it doesn't matter. They give him the friendliest list of reporters possible, and then the staff still has to come out and clean up his remarks. I think it's important for the president to go out and address the American people in front of the cameras as much as possible, and I hope he'll do more of that now. But ultimately, it just creates more work for his staff when he does.
Kevin, speaking of cleanup, I think that the dooziest of doozies in that press conference was when Biden was asked, given that 75% of voters say this country's headed in the wrong direction, what are you going to do differently in the next 2 years? And he goes, nothing.
Dagen, listen, to Cassie's point, I'm just happy that the president is doing more of these press conferences. I'm a guy that says let Biden be Biden. I think he's really effective when he shoots from the hip and takes these questions from the press. You're never going to make the White House press corps happy with anything. They were not happy during the Trump administration, Obama administration, Biden administration. They always want more time with the president and to field more questions. But I'm just happy that he was out there fielding those questions on what was actually a pretty good day after the election for Democrats. We're going to pick up 2 governor seats from the Republicans. We're going to likely hold the Senate based on what's coming out of Nevada and Arizona, and Georgia might not even be consequential to Senate control. And it looks more likely that Republicans might just have 2 seats of a majority in the House of Representatives. That's a terrible night for Republicans, and you saw a president really fired up in that press conference. I want him to do more.
You want him to say that he's not going to do.
Up, I am concerned.
Yeah. Cassie, a final word real quick, because I'm going to do nothing in 2 years when the economy's in a deep recession next year. Probably not the greatest thing to say, but Cassie, real quick, final word.
Yeah, I don't think President Biden can take Tuesday night's results or these results that are still coming in as any sort of mandate or endorsement of his policies. Those are still, as you pointed out in those polls at the top of the segment, wildly unpopular. Democrats have a lot of thinking to do as well. And also, Kevin, can you get him to stop with the whispering? That is so annoying.
No, that was me. I did that.
Well, he does it too. He does it too from time to time. I agree with you, Cassie.
He didn't even respond that way. That's just me doing my best.
He does love that whisper.
Friday impersonation. Cassie Smedile, Kevin Walling, thank you both. Great to see you.
Thanks, Dagen.